to say, look, please don't get upset with this. Don't take it too personally. It's just idiots on a keyboard. It's not going to happen in real life. But I think sometimes people forget in terms of the security we have. My house, you know, it's been fitted with panic alarms and new locks and everything. And in my case, it was just a threat. The police dealt with it. They were great and so on. But it just does make you worry in future that something actually bad could happen.
You described Facebook as a morality-free zone.
I was being unkind to them that day, I think. Yeah. Facebook is a bit of a cult. Let's be honest about it. I mean, it just appears to have a different agenda, in fact, than the other social media companies. And they have a huge impact on society, so therefore, they do need to engage properly with political process. I would like to see them take the approach that I do think some of the other ones are taking. We don't want to see society crumble. So therefore, what we need to do is we need to work to ensure that our platforms are still free, but at the same time, they still have at least an understanding of the social harms that can happen and proper processes in place in order to combat those. Facebook needs to come a long way towards that, and they're not doing it yet.
Lucy, would you like to lead your party one day?
I don't think I would. No, not really. I think the cost on one's actual life would just be far, far, far too great, to be honest. As women, we do weigh up those costs a lot more, the cost to our family, the cost to our lives. I think as women, we do generally, we wear that responsibility is weighted on us a lot more.
The Tory women seem to, I mean, come on, because they've done better, they've done better, considerably better than the Labour Party.
I know, but to be fair, there is I'm not being disparaging about it, but there is a sort of a different sort of culture with maybe people who are a bit posher about boarding schools and nannies and things like that. It's not quite the same as, you know, trying to pair up the socks and deal with the homework.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to Neil Oliver Live. On tonight's show, we'll be speaking to former Chief Scientist at Pfizer UK, Dr. Mike Yeadon. I'll be joined by Ziggy Austin, a photographer who's pictured hundreds of UK caravans nearing a cliff edge after a landslide in Devon. And are New Year diets good for you? Apparently not. We'll speak to registered dietitian Jennifer Lowe. All that ahead after your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Neil. I'm Simon Pusey. These are your latest headlines. Over 150,000 people in the UK have died within 28 days of testing positive for COVID-19 since the pandemic began. A further 313 deaths have been reported in today's daily government figures. UK experts say a fourth COVID jab is not yet needed, as boosters are 90% effective in people over 65 after 3 months. Dr. Carathan Millington-Sanders told GBNews a second booster is not currently necessary.
There is no immediate need to have the fourth booster vaccination, and that will, I'm sure, continue to be under review. The facts continue to be that if you're not vaccinated, severe disease and ITU admissions and death are much more likely. So let's clarify the first important thing is it is crucial that you have your first and second doses if you actually haven't had those, and have your third or booster vaccination dose in the first place.
Court documents show that the tennis player Novak Djokovic, who is fighting deportation from Australia, tested positive for coronavirus last month. His lawyers claim he was granted a vaccine exemption to enter the country because of the recent infection. Czech tennis player Renata Vorokova, who was also detained at an immigration facility in Melbourne, left Australia earlier today after similar visa issues. Police have been called to an unplanned demonstration against the UK vaccine pass scheme in Glasgow. The protest, believed to have been organised by Scotland Against Lockdown, took place at Glasgow Green earlier today. Witnesses say around 1,000 people took part in the procession through the city centre. At least 22 people, including tourists, have died in freezing temperatures after being stranded in their vehicles in northern Pakistan. Most of the victims died of hypothermia. Around 1,000 vehicles are still stranded after more than 4 feet of snow fell in the area overnight. The government has declared the resort town of Murree, northeast of the capital, a calamity-hit area. More than 50,000 homes are without power on the west coast of the US following flooding. Areas of Washington state experienced several days of heavy rainfall, causing roads to be washed away and houses submerged. Members of the National Guard have been sent in to help protect properties. And Madame Tussauds is making a new waxwork of David Bowie to mark the late singer's 75th birthday. This will be the second model the London tourist attraction has made of the music legend. Previously unseen images have been released which show the first sitting Mr. Bowie did in 1983. The new waxwork is due to be unveiled in March. You're right up to date. Now back to Neil Oliver Live.
Thank you, Simon. Now, do you remember those magic eye pictures that were all the rage for a while, in the 1990s especially? At first glance, each looked like a random computer-generated two-dimensional image, like mad wallpaper. But if you looked at one for a while and squinted a bit, suddenly a three-dimensional image seemed to leap forward. Once you got the trick of it, you could do it every time and reveal the picture within the picture. And each time you saw the hidden image, it was almost impossible to unsee it without closing your eyes. There are other patterns now all around us, and you don't need magic eyes to see them. Remember, months ago, I forget exactly when, presidents and prime ministers all over the world started talking about Build Back Better. Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, Boris Johnson, Tony Blair, Jacinda Ardern and many more besides. It was repeated like a mantra by Sadiq Khan, Prince Charles, Prince William, Greta Thunberg, Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, all of them inserting that same three-word phrase into their speeches as often as possible. The same characters also talked at every opportunity about a narrow window of opportunity opened and made available by the pandemic. The narrow window provided, they said, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to reset the world so as to save us from ourselves, save us from future pandemics, from climate crisis, from famine, from all the bad ouchies they could think of. Watching and listening to them, it was hard not to think there had to be a script somewhere, a memo that had been circulated among our dear leaders to ensure they were all on the same page at the same time. As I said at the top, once you notice it, which is to say the repeating pattern, the regurgitating of seemingly rehearsed words, shoehorned awkwardly into every public utterance, you can never again overlook it. What has actually formed, at least it seems to me, is a pattern made of leaders and prominent figures carefully and obediently repeating the same message, as though singing in a choir and harmonising with one another. I don't think that anything remotely like this has ever happened before. In the last few days, I've noticed another apparent merging of messages, a seeming synchronising. The actual words varied, but the meaning and intent was unmistakable. First, I noticed Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, telling a television audience that unvaccinated people were likely also to be misogynists and racists. He actually offered his opinion, while sober and in the full glare of publicity, that fellow Canadians who were hesitant about an experimental medical procedure were likely to hate women and black people. And so my ears pricked up. Next, I read the quotes from a recent interview with French President Emmanuel Macron, in which he said unvaccinated people were irresponsible and that irresponsible people were not citizens. Not citizens. Think about that. I looked up citizen in a dictionary just to be sure and found the word defined as describing a legally recognised subject of a state. Macron said he wanted to make the lives of the unvaccinated, those non-citizens, as unbearable and unlivable as possible. He said he wanted to pee them off. A French president who says the unvaccinated are not citizens is skating on thin ice over deep, dark water. Such a comment is close, I would argue, to saying the unvaccinated are lesser people, that they're not proper people, not proper French people, at the very least, not people deserving to be treated as equals. That's murky water, dangerous ground for all people, and not just serving presidents of modern, allegedly democratic countries sat upon centuries of bloody internecine strife. And then, bumbling and fumbling in the wake of Trudeau and Macron, came our own Boris Johnson. He said, "I want to say to the anti-vax campaigners, the people who are putting this mumbo-jumbo on social media, they are completely wrong. Anti-vaxxer is a disgraceful label. Many people, double and triple vaccinated among them, have questions they want answered. Some of the same people and more besides have particular and special concerns about the vaccination of children against a disease that poses them negligible threat. And yet, according to the words of leaders around the world, such people are next door to idiots, racists and misogynists. They are next to non-people. A letter signed by MPs, doctors and scientists is, as I speak, being sent to the JCVI, asking them to look again at the rollout of the vaccine to children. This morning on GBNews, Brent Taylor, Emeritus Professor of Community Child Health Care at Great Ormond Street Institute of Child Health, voiced concerns about how quickly the vaccine has been produced with limited testing. He said that while the risks were still unknown, he felt they were sufficiently severe to demand a rethink of the policy. I presume Boris Johnson must dismiss this letter and this opinion from a learned authority on child health as more mumbo-jumbo. The opinion of Dr. Robert Malone, inventor of the mRNA vaccine technology and also an avowed opponent of vaccinating children against COVID, must presumably be similarly disregarded by our Prime Minister. Mumbo-jumbo is an 18th century word coined to dismiss as childish nonsense the religious beliefs of the Mandinka people of West Africa. So the implication to be drawn from Boris Johnson's pronouncement is that British people, law-abiding citizens who have been and remain hesitant about an experimental medical procedure, are to be dismissed as no more than ignorant children, little people who ought better, we might presume, to be taken in hand and taught otherwise for their own good. Just before Christmas, Sir Tony Blair, Knight Commander of the Most Noble Order of the Garter, labelled the unvaccinated idiots. He said, "Frankly, if you're not vaccinated and you're eligible and you've got no health reason for not being vaccinated, you're not just irresponsible, I mean, you're an idiot. I'm sorry, I mean, that is truthfully, you are." So there we have it. All within days, as though on cue, those who have chosen not to take an experimental medical procedure made available only under the terms of emergency use authorisation and for which there is as yet no data regarding long-term effects are, according to world leaders past and present, childish idiots full of mumbo-jumbo, are likely to hate women and black people, are not citizens of the French Republic built on foundations of freedom and equality, and fit only to suffer being peed off by the government, paid for by their taxes. All of those parts seen together do not a pretty pattern make. Many of us notice patterns. We can't help it. It comes with being descended ultimately from hunters. We live in a 21st century world of fast-moving technology, but our brains are still running hunter software. When you live in a dangerous, wild world populated by threats great and small, you're more likely to survive if you notice and pay attention to patterns. Patterns suggest things that at the very least are worth watching to see if they might reveal a hidden danger. What amazes me is the apparent clumsiness of all those presumably clever people taking the same tack, even parroting the same words, following what feels like a script, all together at the same time and in plain sight. They might as well be wearing matching jumpers, like the away team sent from the Starship Enterprise to explore a strange new world. I mean, precisely when you might think they'd wear camouflage and seek to blend in, they're sticking out like sore thumbs, like the erstwhile hidden image in a magic eye picture, you might say. I could be wrong, of course. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's a coincidence that Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, Justin Trudeau, Emmanuel Macron, Jacinda Ardern, leaders all, as well as the likes of Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, Greta Thunberg, Prince Charles, Sadiq Khan, and the rest, independently, inside each of their own heads, think that populations should take advantage of a narrow window of opportunity to build back better before the racist, misogynist, non-citizen, mumbo-jumbo talking idiots among the unvaccinated bring the world to an end. I could be wrong about all of it, but I don't think so. Now, all of that is my opinion, of course, but we do like to hear from everyone on this show. So you can and please do email me. Tell us what you think on gbviews at gbnews.uk, and you can tweet us as well at gbnews. If I can, if there's time, I'll read out some of your comments a little later in the show. Now, to help me along the next 2 hours here on GB News, on TV and on digital radio, my wonderful panel. Tonight, Emma Webb, who has been my guest several times before, commentator, broadcaster, and Free Speech Union's Deputy Research Director. Hello, Emma, lovely to see you. And former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. Thank you, Scarlett. Thank you for, I believe, rushing here to be with us this evening, racing against the clock. What do you think? How do you feel, Scarlett? Do you think in recent days the narrative has changed at all? Do you think different voices are, if not coming to the fore, at least being given some airtime that previously they weren't?
When you say, I mean, I think one has to unpack a lot of what you said, right? Is because on both of the vaccination sides, there are very similar things being said. I mean, you know, I get quite frightened when people like Piers Corbyn, who's I mean, we're not allowed to call them anti-vaxxers, are we? Piers Corbyn, who really is anti-vaccination, and people much less strong start talking about, well, it's like they're not proper, it's like the next thing you'll be doing is, it's like the Nazis, you'll be giving them yellow stars. And I think that's really, really bad. And I actually also think that people who say it's all a conspiracy and it's about, you know, Bill Gates and stuff, I think that there are serious questions to be asked, particularly about children, right? And I think it's perfectly reasonable that one asks questions. But I think as soon as either side goes for the other and starts doing it by, you know, either calling somebody racist and misogynist or saying you're a Nazi, I just don't think it works. And the reason I don't think it works is, I mean, and I you know, disagree with Justin Trudeau, is if you want to persuade people to be vaccinated because you think that's the right thing, you do it by persuasion. That's what they did with polio, that's what they did with smallpox, and that's how we eradicated them. You don't do it by insulting people who choose not to.
Emma, listening to Scarlett, my concern would be that the strong words are coming from extremely significant authority figures, leaders of countries, Trudeau, Macron, Johnson, Biden, which is different than, you know, hearing words from, you know, the person in the street. Do you think it's irresponsible? And do you think is it just me, or has that been the tone coming from world leaders all at the same time.
I share your instinct in the way that you described it was, I think, perfect when you said that they're skating on thin ice over dark waters, because I think there is a really dark impulse going on. And I've noticed this actually over the last couple of days. As you say, you mentioned patterns. I have certainly noticed a lot of articles coming out, and one article by Andrew Neil is one example, but there have been a number of them, essentially saying that we need to make life more difficult for the unvaccinated, that they are putting our freedoms at risk. And again, it's this rhetoric of, as you put it, almost as if the unvaccinated are lesser in some way. They are not citizens. They are outside of the remit of the group who should have access to their civil liberties and so on. And I think we've seen this trajectory over many months, but now we seem to be at a place where suddenly, as in many ways our government seems to be pulling back slightly while other governments are going head first into this, governments like Germany, Austria, France with their vaccine passports and so on, our governments seem to be taking a more sort of we have to live with this approach. And I don't know whether this is sort of, in response to that there are those who really want to push in the direction of what is going on in the continent, and therefore they're trying to make this case. But I do find it very, very worrying, and I think it's a very, very dark impulse.
Scarlett, how do you respond reflexively, I suppose? You know that there are, when you hear someone say something, before you have time to process it, there's sometimes just an instinctive feeling. And so when you hear people like Trudeau and Macron saying what they've been saying recently, and as Emma points out, the tack taken in places like Germany and Austria about making life unlivable, do you have a spontaneous, fearful response?
No, I mean what I feel is you're not going to achieve what you want by doing that. Is that actually what you're going? If you call people stupid, right? You're stupid because you're not taking the vaccine. Then they're going to say, "Well, I'm not stupid, and I'm not going to listen to you." And I don't know whether the three of us agree about the vaccine. I mean, I am, double vaccinated with the booster. I do believe that the vaccines really do help people, and I do think that they have been the way out for the last year. But I don't think demonising people who don't take vaccinations is the way to go.
No.
I mean, I think pointing out, the Daily Mail probably runs every day a story about an unvaccinated person dying, right? And actually it's much more saying, look, this is what's happening. I mean, I was amazed when Amanda Patel, who is no liberal, said, the problem is that we've got unvaccinated people in hospital and they are stopping other people from getting beds. And I don't know whether you'd consider that as bad. I certainly think that the way to persuade people, which is what this country has decided to do, not to do vaccine passports, is not to demonise and not to call them idiots, but actually to say, and I mean, there are a lot of, the reason so many people are vaccinated in this country is because they chose to be. Nobody's been made.
There's no denying that there are unvaccinated people in hospital. There are also vaccinated people in hospital. And there are plenty of reports coming from...
Not dying of the Delta. It is unvaccinated.
There are plenty of reports coming from hospitals saying that ITU beds are not overwhelmed and have not been.
And are actually declining.
And, so this narrative running... But Emma, I said in some of my opening remarks there about the narrative changing. I noticed, you'll have seen it as well, I'm sure, the doctor consultant confronting or challenging Sajid Javid, and saying that he himself was not vaccinated, didn't want to be vaccinated, was going to lose his job because he wasn't vaccinated, and put forward in very short but very persuasive sounding, scientifically based terms that he thought the policy was wrong and needed to be reviewed. And just this morning on GBNews, there was an emeritus professor, Brent Taylor from Great Ormond Street, suggesting that the rollout of vaccines had been too rapid with limited testing. And when it came to whether or not it would protect children, he said it was a significant risk not worth taking. Now, those voices coming forward, just as Trudeau and Macron get more strident, a sense that the other side of the argument is coming forward at last.
Yeah, I think there are lots of people who are coming out and saying, firstly, you know, these are people with expert backgrounds saying, firstly, that it's not this heavy-handed approach isn't scientifically justified, and also, you know, suggesting that, as we saw in the case with the vaccination of children, that under the current circumstances with Omicron, that, you know, the approach of mandating vaccines and so on, that isn't something that is proportionate, and you just can't justify it scientifically or ethically. I think we've seen people who have been making this point, you know, over months, but now it does seem to be that these people are, you know, coming out of the woodwork a little bit more, and I think that is, again, as I mentioned, in contrast to a lot of the things that I've seen over the last couple of days, articles coming out pointing to, say, the French approach and saying, well, look how effective the heavy-handed approach has been in essentially pushing people into getting the vaccination. We still have millions of people who are unvaccinated here. These are the reasons why we can't go back to normal life and so on. So I think in many ways the debate is almost becoming more polarised, I suppose you would say. I do think it's a good thing, though, that more people are, you know, people with expert backgrounds are willing to come out and say that this is something that is just not proportionate.
Indeed, it's a topic that we could run with for the entire programme. However, we've got a break coming, and after the break, we will continue the discussion, and we'll be joined then by Dr. Mike Yeadon, former Chief Scientific Officer at Pfizer UK. But first, it's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves, there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking bright but chilly in the east, with further blustery showers across western areas. Zooming into the southwest, and the showers will be focused across parts of Cornwall, Devon and Somerset, with places further east largely dry and a bright start to the day. The brighter skies will also be across southeast England and East Anglia during the morning. There will be a chilly start, though, with a touch of grass frost. Into Wales, and there will be a fair few showers around, which may be wintry across the higher ground. A few icy patches are also possible. A few showers may also move into the Midlands during the morning, but more so across northwest England, where there will be quite frequent, with sleet and snow possible over the hills. Moving across the Pennines, and apart from the odd shower, it should be dry first thing, with the best of the brightness towards the North Sea coast. A cold start, though, with a patchy frost. Into Scotland, and we could see some icy patches first thing, with showers affecting many southern and western parts. It will be drier further east, with some sunshine, especially for Aberdeenshire. Some showers will also move across Northern Ireland during the morning, where they will be accompanied by a blustery westerly wind. The driest weather will be towards the southeast of the country. As we head towards lunchtime, the best of the dry and bright weather will be in the southeast, with showers elsewhere.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. After 2 years of COVID, more and more questions are being asked about the virus and also the way it has been tackled. Many experts from the worlds of science, medicine and also the law have voiced concerns, not just about the vaccines, but about the way our societies have been turned upside down. So all-encompassing has been the strategy applied by one government after another. The freedoms and rights compromised or taken away entirely. It feels like every aspect of life has been affected. My next guest is Dr. Mike Yeadon. He has a background in biochemistry and toxicology. For 17 years, he was Chief Scientific Officer for Pfizer UK, specialising in allergies and respiratory conditions. From the start of the outbreak of COVID, Dr. Yeadon has been an outspoken and often controversial critic of the official handling of the pandemic. He joins me now to explain his fears. Hello, Mike. How lovely to see you there.
Hello, Neil. Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me on your show.
No, it's a pleasure to get the opportunity to hear your voice in real time. Could you first of all, Mike, tell the viewers, tell us your background, the context in which you sit?
Yes, certainly. Yes, I would say I'm a professional biologist. So as you say, I have a degree in biochemistry and toxicology. I don't usually brag, but I was top of year. I then did a research-based PhD in respiratory pharmacology. Then I worked for 7 years at the Wellcome Research Labs, and then 17 years at Pfizer's Sandwich Labs UK. And as you said, I was head of worldwide research for allergy and respiratory. I left 10 years ago on very good terms. I had a lovely time at Pfizer. They were a very good employer. And then over the last 10 years, I've been a consultant to 30 biotech companies. Some are public companies now. And I also had the opportunity to start and lead as CEO my own biotech, where I managed to raise some capital, venture capital, and negotiate with Pfizer to acquire some unwanted compounds from my portfolio, former portfolio at Pfizer. And then with some colleagues, we ran clinical trials, were successful, and that company was acquired by Novartis in 2017. So to those who've criticised me and said I'm an embittered ex-employee, one, I really like working at Pfizer, and two, they really like working with me. And it was only as recently as 5 years ago that a transaction was done. They were a co-owner and co-investor in my biotech. So I think we would say we had a very cordial relationship and left on mutually good terms. And I was fortunate to make a few pennies. So I'm not speaking out to make money, and I'm definitely not speaking out to make fame. I'm actually probably quite a shy person, and this is intensely difficult for me. But I'm speaking out because I don't think what we are being told at all represents the sort of real sort of threat to our health. And we could talk about a few of those points. But yes, I have been a persistent and I think well-qualified critic of government policy.
At what point, Mike, and for what reason or reasons did alarm bells start to ring for you?
Yeah. Early on in 2020, I was in Nice with my wife when we heard tell of this virus coming, and I was really quite frightened. The annual Nice Carnival closed a day early. It's only about 30 miles, I think, from the northern Italian border, and we were very conscious that the virus could be in the crowd. I looked at the statistics, and it looked like at that age, 60, I might have a 1% chance of dying. I didn't fancy that, so I was quite worried. We went home, and as we came up towards the first lockdown, my concern moved to consternation, because I heard government advisors saying things that I just didn't understand why they were saying them, because I knew they weren't true. I could give a couple of examples about saying, well, we're not sure if you've survived this virus, whether you'll be immune. And I thought, well, Immunology 101 will tell you that you should expect to be immune for a substantial period of time, possibly for life. And so at that point, I started listening and thinking, why are you saying these things? I also went to check what data there was in the public domain, like the Diamond Princess. There was an outbreak, big outbreak on a cruise ship, mostly occupied by people of my age and older, which are the prime group to get ill and die. And yet it looked like the lethality was at least 10 times less than they were telling us from Wuhan. And so I thought, by the end of it, I thought, the actual threat in the environment is not much worse than a severe influenza. It's not influenza, different virus, but that's the measure of the threat. And yet suddenly we started doing astonishing things like lockdowns. Seriously, it's so that's what around March. And my wife reminds me that after the first 3 weeks to flatten the curve, when it was extended, she reminds me often that I was tearing up and down the stairs saying, we are in so much trouble. I knew at that point. So seriously, I knew at that point something very bad was happening. And I'm afraid the impression that something bad has happened, as a professional scientist, it's been absolutely obvious to me by May 2020 that I'm afraid it's nothing like you've been told. And I don't want to get you or your station into difficulty, Neil, but I'm very happy to exemplify if you want. So what I mean by the things that we've been told to do are not appropriate. So you guide me. I don't want to run the ship of GBNews on aground.
You allege that we've been lied to.
Yeah,
I think that it's fair to summarise.
Yes.
You say we've been lied to. That some of the information that we've been given by government and their advisors was deliberately misleading. Now,
all of it.
Data, what information is it that you have seen, and in what way have you been able to interpret that information, that data that you feel entitled to make the allegation that you've made?
Yes, certainly. So many things are harder than others, but one thing I will say to your listeners, I've given many interviews, so you can decide whether I'm telling the truth or not. You can go and check whether what I say is true or not. So the long-form interview I gave to an American journalist called Dale Bigtree, sorry about my speech, The High Wire. The program's called The High Wire. So if you search that, it's about an hour-long interview. So I did go through all of the things that I would answer to your question. We don't have time today. But essentially, I'm going to give you one example. We've been told, have we not, to act like we've got it, that essentially people without symptoms can infect other people. It's called asymptomatic transmission. And it underscores pretty much every one of the measures, regular testing of people who haven't got symptoms, wearing masks, even though you have no symptoms, social distancing, business closures, school closures, border controls, all of those hang on this idea that you could be a walking virus bomb. It's not true. It's simply not true. And I can explain why it's not true. And then I can refer you to published information that shows it's not true. So first, in order to be a good source of infection, you have to have lots of virus in your airway, your upper airway in your nose, so then you can breathe it on other people. But if you have lots of virus in your airway, you will have symptoms. It's not possible for you to grow a culture of virus burning through the lining of your airways and not give you symptoms. Equally, when you have these infections, your immune system fights back, raises your temperature, gives you symptoms. So you can't have high levels of virus and no symptoms, but you can't be infectious, highly infectious, without lots of virus. So I'm afraid asymptomatic transmission is not true. That's the theoretical approach. However, it's also been studied practically. And again, I can put it in the notes afterwards. Probably the biggest paper studied hundreds of people who were PCR positive with symptoms and PCR positive without symptoms. The latter are so-called asymptomatic cases. They then studied the frequency with which people infected family members. And the people with symptoms infected a family member about 1 in 5, 1 in 6 times. People without symptoms, it was way under 1%. And that was using PCR tests that have got some kind of low level of background false positives. I believe that data shows that people without symptoms are not able to infect other people. Then I'm going to say 2 other things. Dr. Anthony Fauci is on tape, recorded last year, saying in all the history of respiratory viral epidemics, the driver of it has always been a symptomatic person. He says exactly those words on camera. And then Dr. Maria Kokovi of the WHO said exactly the same. In our studies, she said, we've looked for the frequency with which so-called asymptomatic cases infect other people. We are not finding any. So there you go. That's the theory, the published literature, and the statements from very senior figures in the US and WHO advisory. So why is it our government, France's, Italy's, Germany's, are all saying something different? Well, sorry, it's clearly part of a plan. Why do I say that? Until 2020, and I went and read them, and your listeners can go and read them, each country had a pandemic preparedness plan for events like this. And the only two things those plans contained were, if you are ill, stay home until you are better, and wash your hands more often, because we don't know initially what the transmission route is. The rest of the documents spend 10 pages telling you why it's not justified to mass test the population, to close the borders, to restrict business activities or close schools. So all the things that we're actually doing, I think every one of those is a lie, is inappropriate, and they're all being pushed by all the governments at the same time. And what I think why they're doing that is to frighten us. Why they're doing that is to induce us to get vaccinated. And why they're doing that, I'm afraid, is I think vaccination passports are digital ID. And that's what I think this is about. So that's long story short.
It's a controversial line that you're taking. It's a line, though, that I have heard from other people in other places. But you say that you have the data, that you have read and seen the data that enables you and justifies you making that assessment, yes?
Yes, it's my professional job, I would say, to detect patterns in data. So I'm looking for relationships between the data and an overall theory. And my job is also to try and push it over. So I try and think, well, is what I'm saying true? Can I find any exceptions? And the answer is, a couple of colleagues of mine, doctors Claire Craig and Jonathan Engler, did an exhaustive review of the evidence for asymptomatic transmission. That's a small publication you can go and find. I think it was 7 case reports, 5 or 6 were from China. So I'm afraid we're not able to necessarily check that data. And there was one famous case in Europe of an executive that came back from China and visited several plants in Germany, infecting, I think, 16 of her colleagues. And the claim was that she was asymptomatically transmitting it. But actually, some German journalists followed up within the first 2 days and found out that she had flu, and she'd been taking over-the-counter remedies to kind of barrel through her day. That is the totality of evidence supporting asymptomatic transmission. And decades of evidence, including statements by Fauci in the WHO, go in the opposite direction, including, as I mentioned, papers, peer-reviewed journal articles that have studied this do not find it. So I put it to your listeners that that's a central plank. That's a central plank of policy.
Mike, if you bear with me, one of my guests here tonight, Scarlett Maguire, a former Labour advisor, is making it plain to me that she has something she'd like to ask you.
My problem is that I caught COVID from asymptomatic. I mean, there were 19 of us at my mother's funeral. None of us had any symptoms. Within 2 days, 15 of us had come down with it. Some quite seriously, one in hospital. And I mean, obviously somebody at that funeral had the beginnings of it, but there were no obvious symptoms. I mean, you hear that again and again. I don't understand how you can say that it's just not true.
You don't. That's anecdote. I'm not going to argue with your anecdote.
To me.
I won't do that. Scientists don't argue with that. Anecdotes are not data. So I'm not going to agree or disagree with you. What I'm saying is, when you study it systematically, and study hundreds of people who have PCR positive tests but no symptoms, and PCR positive tests with symptoms, and explore over weeks and months how many infect other people, you find that it's 17% if you're symptomatic, and approximates the false positive rate for the test if you're asymptomatic. And there are dozens of papers like that. So I'm not saying it never occurs. It's very important, in fact, that you understand I'm not saying it never occurs. What I am saying is it's epidemiologically irrelevant. It does not drive epidemics. Fauci says it doesn't. Kokovi says it doesn't. The literature says it doesn't.
Mike, you've spoken at length and with some feeling against mass vaccination. Which at the moment there is a concerted attempt to vaccinate the world. You oppose that. Why?
I find that very, very frightening. I would say to people, the appropriate use of any treatment would be to prevent disease or treat disease in the people who are vulnerable. And we know there's a 1,000-fold difference in the vulnerability of people, and it accords with their age. So if you're old and frail and have multiple other illnesses, just like influenza, you can really quite likely be killed by these things. But if you're under 60 and completely well, and certainly with children, in the case of children, in Germany and Sweden, not a single child has died after infection with SARS-CoV-2. So I would say, most people would say, and this is we did this with influenza for decades. We offer it to people who are in the twilight of years. I mean, I'm 60, I'm not quite twilight, but I qualified for a flu vaccine for the first time last year. But my 35-year-old children weren't offered it. Why do people think this is something we should give to everybody? And I will just say, if this was about public health, there are three things at least that wouldn't happen. If this was about public health, we would not give it to people who've already had the infection. It's been studied. There are over 100 peer-reviewed journal articles now that show if you've recovered from this infection, you are immune. In fact, to a far greater degree than if you've had the vaccines, because the vaccines only give you the taste of the virus, the spike protein, not the nuclear protein and capsid. So you would not expose people to a vaccine if they've already had the infection, because they're immune already. And yet we're trying to vaccinate everybody. There was that doctor yesterday talking to Mr. Javid. He said, I've already had the disease. I'm immune. He can't catch it and he cannot transmit it. So he's the safest person in the hospital to be around. So that's one thing. The next you wouldn't do is to inject children. Children, as I just mentioned, in all of the history of SARS-CoV-2 infection in Germany and Sweden, probably other places, but those two have a full public disclosure, and they've had 0 child deaths. So why would you want to risk? I would say that even if I didn't know the side effects, I would say just don't give it to children. There's a third category, and there's something. I have studied this personally. You would not give it to pregnant women. Pregnant women, by definition, are in the younger age group in order to have children. And have people forgotten thalidomide? For goodness sake. We don't give experimental medical treatments to pregnant women, not since 1960. I was born that year. I have a cousin with one hand missing. So,
Mike, there's a very strong body of opinion would rail against what you're saying there, and would say that well, I'm not of the scientific fraternity, but you're clearly very confident and committed that your analysis of the scientific research that you're reading takes you in this direction. How and why would you say that you are able to run counter to so much of a dominant narrative coming from governments and coming from a large part of the scientific community?
Yes. Well, one, I would challenge whether there is this, as it were, dominant narrative. There's certainly a narrative message. Vaccinate children, vaccinate pregnant women, and so on. But I've looked in the peer-reviewed literature, and it is true that, as with influenza, having COVID during pregnancy does slightly elevate the risk to the mother. It's not as big an elevation as with influenza. But my point is not that. The point is, did you know this, that no reproductive toxicology studies have been completed with any of these vaccines? So what I'm saying is, no one knows what the consequences are, if any, on the developing fetus. No one knows. So that's a concern. And then
Mike,
theoretically,
Mike, as I said, we've got time running against us here.
Okay.
Mike, I think it's so valuable. I think to hear the take that you have on this broad spectrum, wide-ranging, controversial story, and that I think it's undeniable that we do not have long-term data of the kind that I suppose everybody on all sides of the argument wants, and that we're still waiting for enough time to have passed, enough research to have been done before we have that data. But Mike, I have to move on. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for making the time for us, and I'll hope to continue this conversation at a further point. Dr. Mike Yeadon, their former Chief Scientific Advisor. My panel are still here. Emma Webb, commentator, broadcaster and Free Speech Union's Deputy Research Director, and former Labour Advisor Scarlett Maguire. After the break, we're changing topic, and I'll be telling you why 2022 is the year of the lion.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Symptomatic that anyone
Welcome
would
back.
have known that I was symptomatic.
This year, 2022, would have seen the 100th birthday of Bill Travers, the actor, director and animal rights activist, perhaps most famous for his association with Born Free, the film and, of course, the charity that does so much to highlight the plight of animals in captivity. To celebrate Bill's life, and, most importantly, to continue to keep a penetrating light turned on the desperately endangered state of lions in the wild, the charity has declared 2022 the Year of the Lion. In the 1960s, when Born Free was filmed, there were around 200,000 lions born and living free. Just 50-odd years later, there are no more than 20,000, a reduction of 98%. Here to talk to me about the remaining and beleaguered kings of the jungle and Born Free's latest effort to secure their survival are Dr. Mark Jones and Ian Redmond, OBE. Hello both.
Good evening.
Greetings. Ian, just how bad is the situation for lions in the wild?
Well, I think they are beleaguered across their range. Because humans have expanded their agriculture, they have built roads and railways and pipelines that fragment their habitat. And of course, they've killed and eaten a lot of the prey animals that lions depend on. And then, because humans also cultivate livestock for a more secure supply of meat, they get very upset when lions kill their livestock. So if you deplete a predator's prey and then object to it seeking an alternative source of food, of course, you get what's termed human-wildlife conflict. And what Born Free is focused on is human-wildlife coexistence, because it is possible with relatively simple measures to reduce those flashpoints For example, in East Africa, the pastoralist people, the Maasai, the Samburu, keep large herds of cattle and goats, and often they're cash poor. They consider themselves rich if they have a lot of cattle and goats, but they don't have a lot of money. And yet to build a lion-proof enclosure, or boma as they're called in Swahili, costs more than they have. So one of the very practical things Born Free has done is build about 350 lion-proof bomas, predator-proof bomas, because they keep out hyena and leopard as well. And that can help reduce that conflict.
Mark, if I can ask you, I'm sure many of us feel that we've heard that very strong and persuasive argument for many, many years now that, those predators and the people with whom they share territory are in conflict. After all this time, do you think the will is genuinely there on the part of enough of the people who share their world with lions to secure the lions' survival? Or will that persecution of lions just continue because people won't make the accommodation for them?
I think that's a really good question. Now, clearly, as Ian has articulated, and as you said in your introduction, lions are in serious decline. Now, I think people are becoming more and more aware of the broader biodiversity and extinction crisis that we're facing at the moment, with perhaps 1 million or more species across the world at serious risk of extinction. But I think many people perhaps don't realise that lions are very much one of those species. And as Ian has articulated, they face a whole range of threats across their remaining range across Africa. Bear in mind that lions used to range across the whole of Africa, across swathes of Asia, and even across parts of Europe. But these days, their range is very much limited. They've disappeared from most of North Africa. They're in really, really serious decline across East and West Africa, and they're declining across parts of Southern Africa as well. And their range isn't just declining; it's becoming more and more fragmented. So I believe, that indigenous people in areas that live in areas where lions live traditionally have a way of tolerating lions and living alongside lions. But as human beings have expanded our range, if you like, and moved into areas that were traditionally occupied by lions and indigenous people, the way that relationship with wildlife takes place has changed fundamentally. And what we have to do is to go back to a situation where we give people incentives to protect the wildlife that they live alongside, and give them the means and the ability to do so whilst being able to live their own lives. And Ian has talked about the bomas that we're involved in introducing, which is a really important part of that.
Ian, we're short of time as always. Ian, if you could tell me succinctly, what do you have in mind? What do Born Free have in mind for the Year of the Lion? What is going to hopefully turn the attention back to those beasts?
Thank you for asking. Yesterday, we kicked off an amazing exhibition in London, which will tour the country. 25 bronze lions, life-size. It is spectacular. It's a big pride of lions, and it will be raising awareness of the issue. What can people do? The point I was making yesterday is that these are basically big ornaments, and they're very impressive, and they inspire people to want to do something. But real lions are not ornaments. They're apex predators in globally important ecosystems. Now, when villagers were clearing another patch of land for agriculture or grazing their cattle alongside lions and wildlife, and the humans were very much in the minority, our activities didn't really have a big impact. But there are so many of us now, and so much of natural habitat has been destroyed, that, as was being said last year at COP26, the climate conference, we need nature-based solutions. And when people think about...
Ian and Mark, I'm sorry to have to cut you short. I can only amplify for my own part. Okay. The thought of a world without the golden light of lions, the kings of the jungle, is a world diminished. And I wish you all of the very best of success with what you have in mind. So please keep doing what you're doing. It's wonderful to know that you guys are there. Going to take a quick break. Plenty more still to come on Neil Oliver Live. First, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking bright but chilly in the east with further blustery showers across western areas. Zooming into the southwest, and the showers will be focused across parts of Cornwall, Devon and Somerset, with places further east largely dry and a bright start to the day. The brighter skies will also be across southeast England and East Anglia during the morning. There will be a chilly start though, with a touch of grass frost. Into Wales, and there will be a fair few showers around, which may be wintry across the higher ground. A few icy patches are also possible. A few showers may also move into the Midlands during the morning, but more so across northwest England, where there will be quite frequent, with sleet and snow possible over the hills. Moving across the Pennines, and apart from the odd shower, it should be dry first thing, with the best of the brightness towards the North Sea coast. A cold start though, with a patchy frost. Into Scotland, and we could see some icy patches first thing, with showers affecting many southern and western parts. It will be drier further east, with some sunshine, especially for Aberdeenshire. Some showers will also move across Northern Ireland during the morning, where they will be accompanied by a blustery westerly wind. The driest weather will be towards the southeast of the country. As we head towards lunchtime, the best of the dry and bright weather will be in the southeast, with showers elsewhere.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Plenty more coming up this hour on Neil Oliver Live, but it's 8 o'clock, so let's get the latest news headlines from Simon.
Thanks, Neil. Yes, I'm Simon Pusey. These are your news headlines. Over 150,000 people in the UK have died within 28 days of testing positive for COVID-19. That's since the pandemic began. A further 313 deaths were reported in today's daily government figures. UK experts say a fourth COVID jab is not yet needed, as boosters are 90% effective in people over the age of 65 after 3 months. Dr. Catherine Millington-Sanders told GB News a second booster is not currently necessary.
There is no immediate need to have the fourth booster vaccination, and that will, I'm sure, continue to be under review. The facts continue to be that if you're not vaccinated, severe disease and ITU admissions and death are much more likely. So let's clarify the first important thing is it is crucial that you have your first and second doses if you actually haven't had those, and have your third or booster vaccination dose in the first place.
Court documents show that the tennis player Novak Djokovic, who is fighting deportation from Australia, tested positive for coronavirus last month. His lawyers claim he was granted a vaccine exemption to enter the country because of the recent infection. Czech tennis player Renata Vorokova, who was also detained at an immigration facility in Melbourne, left Australia earlier today after similar visa issues. Police have been called to an unplanned demonstration against the UK vaccine pass scheme in Glasgow. The protest, believed to have been organised by Scotland Against Lockdown, took place at Glasgow Green earlier today. Witnesses say around 1,000 people took part in the procession through the city centre. At least 22 people, including tourists, have died in freezing temperatures after being stranded in their vehicles in northern Pakistan. Most of the victims died of hypothermia. Around 1,000 vehicles are still stranded after more than 4 feet of snow fell in the area overnight. The government has declared the resort town of Murray, northeast of the capital, a calamity-hit area. More than 50,000 homes are without power on the west coast of the US following flooding. Areas of Washington state experienced several days of heavy rainfall, causing roads to be washed away and houses submerged. Members of the National Guard have been sent in to help protect properties. And Madame Tussauds is making a new waxwork of David Bowie to mark the late singer's 75th birthday. This will be the second model the London tourist attraction has made of the music legend. Previously unseen images have been released which show the first sitting Mr. Bowie had in 1983. The new waxwork is due to be unveiled in March. You're right up to date. Now back to Neil Oliver Live.
Thanks for all of that, Simon. Now, any lover of our coastline, all 12,000 miles of it, will know the ribbon of territory between the land and the sea is our most dramatic, dynamic and also unpredictable. Wind and weather, crashing seas and blazing sunshine all combine to create an environment that is subject to constant and often sudden change. Photographs captured recently by scientist and coastal explorer Ziggy Austin of a stretch of coastline at Sandy Bay by Exmouth in Devon make frighteningly plain the kind of drama and unpredictability I'm talking about. Ziggy joins me now, I hope. Hello, Ziggy.
Good evening. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. Fellow coast lover, thank you so much for being with me tonight. Tell us, if you would, what exactly happened at Sandy Bay?
It's a little bit of a fake news story, to be honest, because it wasn't a dramatic event like it was kind of billed in the kind of Independent and the Daily Mail. What's been going on there has been a long-term thing, 10 years. Basically, when I first visited 10, 12 years ago, that stretch of coastline there was a beautiful beach. You could walk right along it, and under the bottom of the cliffs, it felt very safe. And then something's changed 10 or 12 years ago, and basically the whole lot, there's a huge stretch of coastline there that's just mobilized, and the whole lot is now slipping into the sea, and it's incredible to watch. It's incredible to see, but it's not a huge event. It's more like the cliff is liquidating before your very eyes, kind of almost in slow motion.
So those pictures are not a snapshot of something that just happened overnight. They're the accumulation
this
of a long
is an ongoing event, and it's something that's going on not just in Sandy Bay. It's the whole of the south coast is undergoing this kind of accelerated period of erosion at the moment, which I'm seeing right down the coast, and lots of us are noticing the changes. So you've been paying attention. You've been paying attention to this. I live right by the beach. So it's also my job, because I take people out coast steering, going down the coast. And if you've heard of coast steering, you might have been out on the coast and put a helmet and a wetsuit on and gone and jumped off a few cliffs. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But as part of that, we have to dynamically risk assess and keep a very close eye on everything that's going on. on the coastline and make sure that it's going to be safe for people, and we know where the zones are where it's particularly dangerous or where we have to manage certain risks. So,
in your time, the time that you spend in those locations, do you see people behaving in a way that you would regard as ill-advised in proximity?
Some of the papers were adding in bits about families sitting down and having picnics at the base of these cliffs, and yeah, you see it all the time. People sitting in really dodgy spots, and I've often walked up to people and just said, "Excuse me, but the other day I saw a rock fall there. You might want to move, or you might want to, put your dog on a lead because it's in a dangerous area." But people don't know. They come to the coastline and they just see it on a sunny day. They just see what they see and they think, "Oh, that's a nice spot." But what they don't realise is that at any moment, any part could just dislodge and come down and land on you. So you need to be super careful.
Is it to do with the components of the coastline in that area? Rather than being solid volcanic rock, are you in an area that's it's largely softer material?
It's an amazing stretch because we've got Jurassic coast, we've got Permian sandstone, we've got ancient limestones which date back from when all the continents were connected as one giant landmass, and then they split apart and travelled, to the corners of the earth, and we've ended up with this really nice piece. But with sea level rise and the interesting weather patterns that we're having lately, it's accelerating the erosion. Also, there's this thing called isostatic rebound, where Scotland used to have a lot of ice on top of it, which actually lifted us out of the sea. But the ice over Scotland has melted, and now the weight has gone off, so we're actually sinking on the south coast. We're actually sinking into the sea. So we've got accelerated sea level rise down here. And in my lifetime, I've certainly noticed, significant rise.
It's a fascinating story, Ziggy. I love, apart from anything else, that combination of, as you say, after effects of glaciation. 20,000 years ago.
I've got a couple of your books that I've got your coast from above, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm not,
fantastic. I love it. It's the way in which everything's on the coast. Oh, what a good man! We could have, if only I'd known.
I thought I'd come on and cheer you up. You've looked a bit.
Ziggy, I'll definitely have you back to talk more about the coast. But for the moment, thank you very much, and happy reading. I have to say, if you haven't already read them, thank you, Ziggy. Scarlett, you were. I could see that you were paying attention there to the bit about isostatic rebound, and you were. You seemed interested in that concept.
So you. Maybe I'm really stupid, but I sort of thought that the Earth was like this, and then you had these things where you had the sea. I mean, I didn't actually realise that it was more like a seesaw, and that when Scotland got lighter, we come up.
Yeah, I've always thought about it. I've always visualised it in terms of a sofa cushion with a heavy bottom on it. Was just pushed flat, and then once the person stood up and walked away, the cushion puffed itself back up again. So the land recovers from what had been this unimaginable weight of ice, and it's tipping. So as Scotland rises up, England is tipping.
Well, I think the Scots will have a lot to say about that.
Emma, how does that story strike you? That idea that the place is a work in progress for me, always changing.
That's exactly it. I find this fascinating, and as you said, thinking about how we are coming out of an ice age, and
we still are.
It places us in this sort of tiny time slice, and it gives us a sense of where we are in relation to this vast, open future before us. And I just find it absolutely fascinating, and it makes me feel tiny. It's sort of, Edmund Burke's idea of the sublime. You sort of feel dwarfed by it. Yeah. And it's something that is entirely out of our control. We just have to submit to it.
To be confronted by the reality that we're still, the landscape is still recovering from the ice age.
Yeah.
That's beyond the reach of, that's from time immemorial. So over the hill in history. And yet our country, our landscape is still moving in response to the fact that, as far as it's concerned, recently a great big block of ice melted, and it's still coming back.
And so many of the cliffs. I mean, not just in Devon, but I mean, Norfolk and those. You go there, and even year by year it changes. I mean, it might not be dramatic in his terms, minute by minute or overnight, but honestly, it's incredible.
Yeah, I always think that, because we're so obsessed with the weather, we see that map every day of the British Isles as though it were permanent, as though that was fixed. But on the contrary, with every wave that breaks, with every storm, the outline of the landscape, the archipelago, is minutely or considerably redrawn.
It's a good antidote to hubris, isn't it? We were talking earlier about everything to do with the pandemic. I think, particularly in our own age, there is a definite inclination towards some serious sort of Promethean hubris. We think that we can control everything, and this is a reminder that everything is constantly changing and we're just inhabiting a very, very small patch of it.
Yeah, I get great comfort from thinking about the fact that while we are so preoccupied with our little lives, the planet, the landscape, is doing something else to a completely different rhythm.
I mean, it's like on a summer night, or particularly sort of in Europe or somewhere, and you look up at the sky and there are all the stars and you realise that you're just nothing. I mean, it is, you're right. You realise you are as nothing, and in 50 years' time, all of that will still be there. But of course, the landscape will have completely changed.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Well, to change the tune, to move on, as we inevitably have to do, I fear I haven't a musical bone in my body. I can't sing, or at least I won't, and I can't play any instrument, although I have tried over the years. That said, I do understand the power of music, and I'm hardly alone. Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu said, "Music in the soul can be heard by the universe." Mozart said, "The music is not in the notes, but in the silence in between." And Plato said, "Music gives a soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and life to everything." My next guest knows the power of music too. She's a songwriter and a vocal coach, and over the last few years has dedicated her time to using music to help hundreds of people suffering from depression. She is my Great Britain tonight, one of those people who make the world a better place by confronting difficulties of their own and in their response, finding ways to help not just themselves but others. Her name is Rachel Mason, and she joins me now. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too. As I said, I'm a lover of music, I suppose. I listen to music of all sorts, but I can't and won't sing, and I can't play. But I understand instinctively where it is that you're coming from. Now, you had your own encounter with depression, did you not? Can you tell us first of all about that?
I did. I'd suffered with depression when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, going through a divorce and various other things. And then after my children were born a few years ago, I suffered really badly with postnatal depression, which I really struggled to deal with, actually. I struggled to tell anyone because I felt so ashamed that I was going through, after having a beautiful little baby, that I was struggling. But then eventually I got some help. But I found the only thing that really helped me before I went to the doctors and got some professional help was writing lyrics down. Because I'm a songwriter, I would just write down my thoughts in the form of lyrics. And I found that really helped me to start processing what I was going through and the confusing emotions and the kind of ups and downs of everything. And from that, I set up, once I was recovered as much as I could be from postnatal depression, I set up Lyrical Light to help other people going through their own postnatal depression and anxiety and postpartum psychosis and other awful things that new mums and dads go through.
Do you think, based on your experience, can music help everyone?
I think it can. Music has this amazing uniting power, and I quite often run competitions and judge festivals abroad, and even when people don't speak the same language, the language of music itself actually brings them together, and you find people often kind of laughing and crying together about the songs and connecting on a level that they couldn't through any other medium, I think.
I sometimes think that I'm not minimising for one moment the impact that depression has on people's lives, but I think you touch on something I think that's very important, that it can also lead to something creative. You found, although you were you were suffering what you were suffering, and yet it was still something that would kindle something that previously and hitherto had not existed. You know, after your child, you also brought forth, on account of your depression, something that had not been there before.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky that I was able to come through it. I had a lot of support from my husband and my family. They were amazing. And I did, I'm still on antidepressants actually, and I had counselling and things, but I'm the kind of person who likes to come through something and try and do something good with it, try and help others. Not everybody feels able to. Some people go through a very different journey and feel they need to keep that kind of that process that they went through to themselves, and it was more about their own healing, which is absolutely fine. So I feel very, very lucky in a way that I was able to come through the process and feel ready to share and help others.
Rachel, I'm just going to turn to my guests here in the studio. Scarlett, does that make sense to you that when someone's in a dark place, a sad place, that music could and would be a part of the remedy and the therapy?
Yeah, because the thing about music is it pulls you to different places, doesn't it? I mean, it can be, just incredibly wonderful. But the other thing is that you hear a pop song that was around when, there were some times when I was a teenager, and I just can go back there and I can remember everything. I mean, there are certain songs that I find very depressing, I have to say, not just because of the lyrics. I think music is incredible. I mean, I think you can hear the beginning of a song and it completely changes you. I think it's fantastic.
It's true. Rachel, I think there's a track, Illuminate the Night, that was part of the product of your experience. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I wrote that as part of a lyrical light workshop with a group of you're hearing it now, a group of mums and dads who were struggling with their own postnatal depression, and they came up with the lyrics with me, with discussing what we were going through, the experiences we shared. So it felt like a very safe place to talk about it because they knew I understood. I'd been there too, and then I put the song together from all their ideas, and then recorded it. And the money from the proceeds of the song have gone to Pandas, which is a mental health charity for mums, for maternal mental health. So it feels a real honour to get to have done that.
Emma, I think it almost goes without saying, doesn't it, that the famous creatives, musicians among them, when you look into their stories, they're not always the happiest of people. There's definitely, I think, a correlation between all of the rich tapestry of life can lend itself to creativity, isn't it? It's not as though it all comes from a happy place, is it?
Yeah, and actually I think a lot of the greatest art in history, not just music, but literature as well, has been fed by a kind of darkness in the human soul. And I think this is what is being done here is wonderful. And people often, when they're depressed, lose interest in things that they had previously loved. And if this is a way for people to find something that they feel passionate about and to tap into that feeling again, and I think music and other forms of art as well, it depends on the individual, but music particularly seems to have a kind of universal ability to tap into something primal in all of us. And I think that it makes perfect sense that could be something that is very therapeutic.
It's Rachel, how do you feel hearing both Scarlett and Emma there? I think we all instinctively, myself included, we can tap into what it is that you're doing. So how do you feel knowing that you've struck a chord, if I could be so corny as to say that what you're doing resonates. There's another one with people. It's the Great Britain segment is intended to remind people that even out of the darkest times can come something positive. You're another embodiment of it.
Yeah, it feels... Well, I was really honoured to, first of all, be given a British Citizen Award. I've got it on here, sort of just below there it is. They asked me to show it. So I was given that award partly for Lyrical Light, but for other projects I've run as well for communities with music. And it just feels a real honour to be able to have done something that seems to have reached people. And I get letters still from mums and dads who have gone through the Lyrical Light course and have the lyrics up that they wrote with me. They got them up in their house, or they listen to the song and they say, I listen to it and I can see how far I've come. I can see how much I was struggling and how much better things are now. So that's an incredible kind of thing, to be a very tiny part of someone's journey through their mental health. And, you know, postnatal depression, you know, mental health problems in any way are really hard. They're really difficult, and they're on the rise, obviously, with the pandemic and everything that's been happening. People have been struggling more. But it's actually more common than a lot of people have wanted to admit. So it feels like we're able to talk about it more now, and it's kind of normalised it. So I feel really honoured that I've been able to be part of this kind of movement in a very small way, and be able to reach people in a way that sometimes counselling didn't, sometimes other kinds of therapies just didn't feel right for them. So even though this felt a bit odd because it was music and not all these people were musical, they just
It's just lovely, Rachel. It's just lovely, Rachel. Thank you for sharing that experience with us and reminding us, as so many of the Great Britons do, yourself included, that, you know, out of the darkness can come a light, and that's what you've been able to do. So thanks for being with us this evening. Just before we head for another break, regular viewers of the show will know that just before Christmas, I spoke to a company making a new snack, chicken crackling. Those same viewers will remember the fact that I was promised a taste of it, of the aforementioned delicacy, but my sample packs didn't arrive, lost in the pre-Christmas rush, let's say. But fret not, good to their word, the folk at the original chicken crackling have persevered, and now I have in my possession, and for the delectation of my guests, some samples. And I'm a generous and giving person, and I've decided to share the bounty. Now, Scarlett, I think I'm right in thinking that you're not given to chowing down on the animal flesh.
I'm afraid I don't eat meat, but I'm sure they're great.
Emma and I are going to give
I'm willing to take one for the team and have a double.
I think over closest to Scarlett is a habanero flavour. Yes. And then in the middle,
try the chili.
Thank you.
We're going to give this a go. Now, watching with me with bated breath is the company founder, Robert Jebb. Hi, Robert. This is going to be my first taste. Genuinely, this is the habanero. So, oh my giddy aunt. That's fairly sharp, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That is a spiky, spicy snack. Thank you for sending it in, Robert. It's not as though I've got shares in the company or anything, in case anyone was wondering, but I felt like I had to revisit the story since we couldn't taste any last time around. How did you come up with this? I have to say, this is the sea salt. I'll try that while you tell me how you came up with this snack. Oh, we're not hearing you. We're not hearing you there. We're not hearing from our chicken crackling expert and aficionado there. But I can tell you, what do you reckon, Emma?
That sea salt one is great. I knew this was going to be life-changing.
Yep. The habanero is brilliant.
Thank you.
Try the barbecue.
Oh, I think we have our crackling person. Back again. Where are you? There you are, Robert. Sorry, we didn't get it. How did you come up with this as a snack? What was its genesis?
I basically spent sort of 15 years or so as a creative in the advertising industry, basically coming up with fresh ideas for clients. And as I decided to move away from that industry, the next logical decision for me was to come up with something that hadn't been done before. So I locked myself in a room with a piece of paper and a pen, and this is what I came up with. So I had no manufacturing or food experience or retail experience or anything like that. It was just a concept. And sort of a few years later, here we are producing our own product in our own factory. And hopefully 2022 is Year of the Chicken rather than Year of the Lion.
Well played, Robert. I have to say thank you for being true to your word and sending these wonderful samples along. I can't think of anyone who likes a roast chicken who wouldn't like chicken. Crispy chicken skin. Everyone loves that, and so chicken crackling is very evocative of the same. Thank you very much for being with us and for titillating our taste buds. Thank you. After the break, we catch up with Monkey World. Now, Monkey World is an animal sanctuary, and they're looking after Millie the monkey, who was sadly and in the most appalling way abused by her previous owner. But there's a happy ending coming. But first of all, inevitably, once again, here's the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking bright but chilly in the east, with further blustery showers across western areas. Zooming into the southwest, and the showers will be focused across parts of Cornwall, Devon and Somerset, with places further east largely dry and a bright start to the day. The brighter skies will also be across southeast England and East Anglia during the morning. There will be a chilly start though, with a touch of grass frost. Into Wales, and there will be a fair few showers around, which may be wintry across the higher ground. A few icy patches are also possible. A few showers may also move into the Midlands during the morning, but more so across northwest England, where there will be quite frequent, with sleet and snow possible over the hills. Moving across the Pennines, and apart from the odd shower, it should be dry first thing, with the best of the brightness towards the North Sea coast. A cold start though, with a patchy frost. Into Scotland, and we could see some icy patches first thing, with showers affecting many southern and western parts. It will be drier further east, with some sunshine, especially for Aberdeenshire. Some showers will also move across Northern Ireland during the morning, where they will be accompanied by a blustery westerly wind. The driest weather will be towards the southeast of the country. As we head towards lunchtime, the best of the dry and bright weather will be in the southeast, with showers elsewhere.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with me. Many of you will have seen, I'm sure, the deeply distressing images of a pet monkey that was subjected to a life of constant fear and cruelty at the hands of her owner. Vicky Holland made videos of the cruelty she inflicted, including an attempt to flush the creature, a marmoset called Millie, down the toilet. I mean, words fail. Holland fed the monkey burgers and kebabs and also encouraged her to consume cocaine. Holland has been barred for life from keeping any animal and was given a suspended jail sentence. Happily though for Millie the monkey, she's on the mend. she's in the care of the primate specialists of Monkey World, a sanctuary in Dorset, where she's being gently coaxed back to a better life and a better state of mind. And apparently she has even found herself a mate. To tell me more about Millie, I'm joined now, I think, by Dr. Ros Clubb, Senior Scientific Manager at the RSPCA. Hello, Ros.
Hello.
Thank you for being with me. This is an awful story. I ran across it, I think, on social media, and we've got the footage and the pictures, but we decided not to show any of it, frankly, because it's so distressing to any, decent and normal human being. But how did Millie's treatment at her owner's hands compare to other cases that you've seen over the years?
Yeah, this one was a particularly appalling case, like you said, really awful footage and treatment of an animal. And so this one was brought to our attention by the Gwent police, who went in and found video footage on the owner's phone. This one, it's particularly cruel treatment and kind of laughing and swearing at the animal. So that's not as kind of common, but the kind of keeping an animal like this in the home, in like a bird cage, or running around the house with the kids and a dog, and feeding it human food, and keeping one on its own. Unfortunately, that is a typical situation that RSPCA inspectors deal with far too frequently. And, these are animals like marmosets that are native to the South American rainforest, and instead we're finding them alone in people's homes being fed chips, burgers and marshmallows.
So apart from the cruelty that was deliberately inflicted, just the fact of keeping a naturally gregarious social animal on its own is cruelty of a sort.
Exactly. And unfortunately, we do see fairly young ones as well that have clearly been removed from their parents. So naturally, they would be staying with their parents at least for like 18 months. But we see some even just a couple of months old that have clearly been taken away from their parents, often to bond more with the owner. But then the poor wee things are just on their own, and no company of their own kind. They're highly, highly social animals. They need access to loads of enrichments, climbing branches, being able to get up high, get into nest boxes, UV light to give them, which is from the sunlight, which is essential really, along with a good diet, to lay down good strong bones. And a common thing we see is marmosets in particular, that are very prone to this, is metabolic bone disease, which is known as rickets in humans. So they don't lay enough calcium down in their bones, and it's a really painful condition that can lead to them fracturing their bones, and very vulnerable to developing fractures. And it's just an awful condition, but unfortunately we do see it time and time and time again, and that's one of the reasons, the myriad of issues we see time and time again, is why the RSPCA has been campaigning for years now to try and get a ban on keeping primates as pets. And thankfully the government's finally taken note, and we should be seeing restrictions fairly soon, hopefully.
What condition then was Millie in when she arrived with the primate specialists at Monkey World? What kind of sad marmoset was she?
Yeah, so I think as we've seen in many others, she was not in a healthy state, as you can imagine, being fed burgers and fries rather than the specialist diet that she should have had. So she was really unhealthy, a bit underweight, showing signs of metabolic bone disease. But thankfully, Monkey World are just fantastic, and they've got a wealth of experience, not just with marmosets and other primates, but dealing with these poor marmosets rescued from the pet trade, which come with a host of health issues as well as psychological problems. But they've got a great team that rehabilitate these animals, integrate them with others of their own kind, and so that they can live as they should, with others that they can mix with and cuddle down to bed with in the evening. And gradually they can make a great recovery, actually, with the care that they've got.
And is it right, I said at the top, that she has pair bonded, she has she has met a significant other. I don't know what terms to use in relation to a small marmoset monkey called Millie, but she's not alone anymore.
She has bonded with another marmoset, and that's another thing that can be really tricky with these, especially when they've been taken away from their parents at a really young age, and they haven't necessarily learned all the social skills that they need to integrate into a group. But because of the wealth of experience that the Monkey World team have, they know how to do it in the best way possible, and to kind of pair up with the right one, so that they can have the chance of living a kind of normal-ish life for a marmoset. So it's really wonderful to see the kind of the happy after story, especially having such an awful start in life. And we've seen that time and time again, and Monkey World have taken in many primates through the RSPCA as well as through others, through the police and local authorities, and they've got a great success rate. But unfortunately, it just shouldn't be happening, that animals are entering into situations, going into people's homes who don't know how to look after them properly. And we sadly see the tail end of that further down the line. But at least we're able to rescue these animals and give them a happy life.
And will Millie live out her life at the sanctuary? Is that her forever home?
That's her forever home. She's very lucky to have landed there, and the team will take great care of her. And it's great to hear updates of the animals that are rescued, and to see the videos and the photos of them, just to see that they can be okay when they're in the right hands.
It's great. It's such an awful story. I was appalled by how it began, but to hear your account of how she's living now, it's lovely, and it's a story that has come to a happy conclusion. So, Ros Clubb, Senior Scientific Manager at the RSPCA, thank you so much for your time, and do feel free to keep us up to date with Millie's continued rehabilitation. These stories never cease to appall me. The casual cruelty of the human species at times. Moving on, Inverness Castle is to finally reopen to the public for the first time in almost 200 years. The 19th century buildings have previously been used as a court and as a prison, but will now be turned into a tourist attraction. Scotland reporter David Donaldson has more.
It dominates the skyline of the Highland capital, but now Inverness Castle is to be transformed. £18 million of funding from the Scottish and UK governments will see it undergo a makeover to help attract more tourists to the area.
I'm really excited to let the public inside and also just to enjoy the building and the castle grounds themselves. We really want to bring the whole of the castle area into the public realm so that people from the Highlands and visitors to the Highlands can really have a place to just go and enjoy, whether they go into the visitor attraction or the restaurant or the shop. Whereas focusing as much on the grounds themselves as we are on the building, just so that it's a great place to go and visit and stay for a while.
Over the centuries, previous castles were attacked and burned down. The last of these was destroyed by Bonnie Prince Charlie's Jacobite forces before the Battle of Culloden in 1746. But despite its grand history, the castle isn't being turned into a museum.
This is an example of one of the old cell doors that we've revealed that was covered over in plasterboard. And you can see that it's really tight, small space, and that was symptomatic of the whole building. You came into your cell block, the window was tiny, the bars were over the window, but we're going to try and keep these so that as you go around the building, you can read the story of how it used to be. And this space is going to become enclosed by a new single-storey link building. And the other interesting thing is the modern cell block, which was just behind me until recently, has now been demolished, and for the first time we're seeing the original door openings on the back of the South Tower and the space as it's going to be in the new link building.
Highland Council are also working with the Great Tapestry Company to help produce the story of the Highlands.
Great Tapestry of Scotland is a chronological recording of the history of Scotland. We're working with the Great Tapestry Company who created the tapestry and gala shields, but this time it's not a history of the Highlands, it's the spirit of the Highlands told through the panels. So the Great Tapestry Company will work with the same themes that our designers are working with, but then they'll give the panels to each of the different hubs across the area, and the local stitchers will put their perspective into the panels in the same way where the local stitchers for the Great Tapestry added their own dimension to the themes that the Great Tapestry Company gave them.
Work here is due to get underway in February or March this year, with the castle set to open its doors to the public in 2025.
Thank you for that, David Donaldson. I love to hear stories about buildings that you could so easily otherwise fall into forgetfulness. And if we want to conserve these places, it's so important and so inspiring to know that a project like this brings Inverness Castle back into the body of the kirk, makes it part of the community and part of the town once again. It's great stuff. After the break, are New Year diets good for you? I have my own thoughts on that one. See you soon.
On Mark Dolan tonight, my Mark Meets guest is former royal butler Grant Harold, spilling the beans about the inner workings of our royal family. In The Big Question, is Nicola Sturgeon now drunk on power? And US showbiz queen Kinsey Schofield gives us all the latest gossip from Hollywood in Uncensored USA. Plus my all-star panel, and in my Big Opinion monologue, Prince Andrew is a right royal numpty who has let down the Queen and his country. See you at 9.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. As promised, there's an opportunity now to look at some of your content on social media. Chris on Twitter, I have it here printed out. Chris on Twitter, that was brave to air that interview with Dr. Mike Yeadon. Well done, GB News. Thanks for that, Chris. Iraq Lobster, where do people come by these handles? I really don't know. Iraq Lobster says, good on GB News for giving Dr. Mike a platform. It would be great to have another scientist with experience who has opposing views. Kyle on Twitter says the data do not show there to be risks for children. And Jude tweeted, Beards talking about lions, ace. GB News, you're bloody marvellous. Thanks for that, Jude. Moving on. The start of the new year, where we are now, is tough for many people for many reasons. The excitement of Christmas is past, and stretching before us are the dark months of the rest of the winter. What is there to look forward to, we ask ourselves. It's often a time for reviewing our lives, taking yet another look at ourselves and wondering what would make us better, what would make us happier people. Enter, in that vulnerable stage, the fad diet. the promises made to us by those snake oil salespeople promising that if we follow their diet advice, they'll turn us into the beautiful people, free of the troublesome, unwanted pounds and stones and lumps and bumps we've been carrying around. But as with all offerings that seem too good to be true, the New Year diet promising a new, slimmer, happier you is often not what it seems. My next guest, keen to help us avoid the fads and so be better informed about our health and physical well-being generally at this time of year, is registered dietitian Jennifer Lowe. Hello, Jennifer.
Hi.
Did I get that right? Are we especially vulnerable to something like a New Year diet, because it comes in the aftermath of so much excitement and excess?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of pressure on people at this time of year to be changing themselves, following a new plan. There's a lot around weight loss in the media, I think, at this time of year as well. And people feel that January is a good time to sort of reset where they've been.
How do you spot a fad diet? Clearly, diet, it's such an amorphous term, isn't it, really? We've all got a diet in as much as we all eat to live, eat to survive. What are the warning signs if you're reading in a magazine or on a website that you should be thinking, that sounds suspicious?
Yeah, anything that sounds too good to be true is normally too good to be true. So anything that's promising really rapid weight loss, probably cutting out whole food groups, potentially telling you that there's a big secret that nobody's ever told you about how to lose weight, and this is it. If you spend this amount of money, you too will be this new, slimmer version of yourself. Quite often they'll suggest expensive supplements or expensive tests that you have to do. So yeah, there's lots of sort of warning signs. Spending lots of money and anything that promises rapid weight loss is normally a fad diet.
My hunch has always been that you couldn't have a one-size-fits-all anyway. How could you possibly put together a diet and have it be suitable for 7.8 billion people on the planet? Don't you have to apply a bit of experience of your own self and know by now the sorts of things that make you feel better and those that make you feel worse?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that awareness is really important, actually. And I think, when people come to see me and they've often been on and off diets, most of their lives, adult lives, up until the point that they come and see a registered dietitian, they'll come and see me and they'll sort of be saying, actually, they are quite aware by that stage what works for them and what doesn't work for them. But actually keeping some kind of food and mood diary is quite useful, because quite often we'll find that people will eat in certain situations. So they might eat in response to stress, or they might eat in response to being upset or very happy, or, whatever. And knowing that about yourself is quite important, but also knowing sort of what works for you in terms of your day and in terms of your job. Like, actually, shift workers have a very different pattern to people who work a 9-to-5 job, and actually they need to think about their diet in a slightly different way and make sure that they're fueling themselves for night shifts and things like that. So yes, absolutely, everybody has very different lives, everybody has very different lifestyles, and you can fit a healthy lifestyle to somebody's life, but that's quite difficult to do if you're just selling a one-size-fits-all type of package.
I've also thought as well that it surely must be to do with us in our society, particularly in British society, perhaps as bad as anywhere else. We're disconnected from food, aren't we? We don't grow food anymore, and we don't really see food unless it's cling film wrapped in a supermarket, and not having that kind of visceral, natural connection to where meat comes from and where vegetables come from, and knowing how to cook them from scratch at home. I do feel we've lost touch with food on the whole.
I think we have, and I think that cooking from scratch is quite an interesting point, because actually there is lots of evidence that cooking from scratch, obviously you create much healthier meals, but also I think our lifestyles are such that a lot of people don't have the time to cook from scratch. And so it's sort of about finding the healthier, convenience ways of eating as well. So, not necessarily relying all the time on takeaways or eating out, and actually still cooking at home, but perhaps using some of the shortcuts when you need to. I know certainly for me, I've got 2 young kids, and we're all over the place, and I'm obviously running a business, and so the thought of spending 2 hours cooking dinner that just doesn't happen. And I think that's for a lot of the population, that's the same.
Is it still the case that is there still a generalisation that women are under more pressure in this area than men, or do you increasingly get men coming forward and looking for this kind of advice as well? I've always felt that being chastised about appearance is much more a cross that women bear rather than men. But are men increasingly worried about their appearance and their diet and their look?
Yeah, certainly. I think health-wise, men are becoming more coming forward about it more, probably. I think it's always been something that's more female oriented and more pressure. Certainly there's a lot of pressure on women to look a certain way, and that's our society, and I hope one day that changes, one day quite soon, because that's not great. But I think I work in bariatric surgery as well, and we definitely see a lot more men coming through now than we did, say, I don't know, 10 years ago when I started working in bariatric surgery. Certainly more men are coming through to have surgery, and that's not necessarily for looks reasons, it's mainly for health reasons generally.
Jennifer, I'm just going to open this up to my guests here with me as well, because it's such a huge topic, diet. Yeah. Scarlett, have we an unhealthy relationship with food, full stop, would you say?
Yes, I mean, I have just been offered chocolates outside, and I have to say, I said yes. And for me, Christmas and Easter is a terrible time for chocolates. I think you read about people saying, well, if you just let your body say it'll be okay. Well, my body. I mean, if I ate what my body would wanted, I would honestly be a good 3 stone heavier. So I do have to think about food. I mean, this sounds really old-fashioned of me, but I do think the reliance on takeaways is just terrible. I mean, you're going to have to get a very, very expensive takeaway to get a decent meal with lowish calories.
Emma, do you cook from scratch? I mean, is that part of your practice?
I have been doing a lot of cooking from scratch lately, and and this is going to make it sound like a complete millennial, but I do often think when, looking at the sorts of food that you can get readily available if you're out and about, if you've got a busy life and you're just trying to find somewhere to get food from, and you look around yourself and you're thinking, none of this is actually food. This isn't real food. And I think I thought it was a really good point made there that with a lot of these fad diets, that they try to sell you this idea that there's some kind of secret. The secret to healthy eating and weight loss is willpower and small portions, not being extreme in any particular sense, everything in moderation. And I think as well, knowing what works for you. Some people are good with carbs, some people are bad with carbs, and it's about having that kind of self-knowledge. But of course, cooking from scratch is something, particularly in my generation, is just not very common.
Jennifer, how do you feel about Emma's summary there? That made a basic sense to me. Was that a neat summation of the general way to better health and better diet?
Yeah, I think I think carbs get a lot of attention still, and certainly switching to whole grain carbs is good. Increasing your fibre, which is obviously great for your bowel health and heart health and everything. I think in terms of that kind of listening to your body, actually there's quite a big body of research now that shows that if you can really tune in to the sort of internal signals that your body's giving you, so your hunger and fullness, you can find a weight that's good for you. Now, obviously we're all very used to not doing that. Actually, we quite often look for external cues rather than look internally to what we really need. And also there's quite a lot of emotion around food. So I noted, when you said about having the chocolates, and it's almost like you kind of go, oh, but there's a part of you going, oh, but I shouldn't have actually had that, I should have said no. Whereas actually, if we could just kind of make all foods neutral, that would be amazing, because we could just go, do you know what, we might have chocolate,
Jennifer,
or we might
I'm going to have to pull up short there, because we're just simply running out of time. Fascinating subject. Thank you, Jennifer, for being with me. That's all from me on Neil Oliver Live for this week. My thanks to my panel, Emma and Scarlett. Thank you for being illuminating guests. Mark Dolan is up next. I'll see you same time next week. Eat healthy and be happy. Enjoy your week.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking bright but chilly in the east, with further blustery showers across western areas. Zooming into the southwest, and the showers will be focused across parts of Cornwall, Devon and Somerset, with places further east largely dry and a bright start to the day. The brighter skies will also be across southeast England and East Anglia during the morning. There will be a chilly start though, with a touch of grass frost. Into Wales, and there will be a fair few showers around, which may be wintry across the higher ground. A few icy patches are also possible. A few showers may also move into the Midlands during the morning, but more so across northwest England, where there will be quite frequent, with sleet and snow possible over the hills. Moving across the Pennines, and apart from the odd shower, it should be dry first thing, with the best of the brightness towards the North Sea coast. A cold start though, with a patchy frost. Into Scotland, and we could see some icy patches first thing, with showers affecting